Section 1. The Silence of Power. Why solitude was sacred to Marcus Aurelius. There is a silence that only the powerful understand. Not the silence of defeat, not the quiet of weakness, but a deliberate, chosen silence, a silence carved out in the chaos of empire, forged in the fire of self-mastery. This is the silence Marcus Aurelius sought, over and over again. Imagine the weight of an empire on your shoulders, every decision affecting millions, surrounded by betrayal, corruption, and war. And yet, in the middle of that madness, he did not crave noise. He did not seek the distractions of pleasure or the comfort of constant companionship. Instead, he turned inward. He sought solitude, because he knew something we've forgotten in the modern age. Solitude isn't loneliness. Solitude is strategy. Marcus understood that in solitude, you meet your truest self. You cannot lie to yourself when there's no one else to perform for. No audience, no applause, no flattery, just you, your thoughts, your flaws, and your potential. And in that naked space, something extraordinary happens. The soul sharpens, the mind strengthens, the distractions fall away, and the essentials come into focus. Power grows not in crowds, but in silence. And Marcus didn't just theorize this, he lived it. He wrote to himself for himself. His private journal, now known as Meditations, wasn't meant to be published. It was his refuge, his training ground, his silent war room. That is where he shaped the philosophy that guided his rule. That is where he became an emperor, not just of Rome, but of himself. Think about what that means. The most powerful man in the world didn't rely on others to define him. He didn't need validation, praise, or company to feel whole. He carved out moments to be alone, not in weakness, but in discipline. Because solitude, for the wise, is not emptiness. It's a forge, a place where the mind becomes iron, the soul becomes steel. And today, more than ever, we've lost touch with that. We are drowning in noise. We're surrounded by people, but disconnected from ourselves. We're addicted to attention, validation, distraction. We fear being alone because we've never been taught the truth. Solitude isn't the absence of life. It's the birthplace of power. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He knew that true leadership begins with leading yourself. And you cannot lead yourself if you don't know yourself. So he isolated himself from the crowds, not to escape the world, but to confront it more powerfully. And that's the paradox. The more time you spend alone, the stronger you become in the world. Solitude isn't retreat, it's preparation. When Marcus sat in the quiet of his own mind, he wasn't avoiding life, he was sharpening his weapons: reason, patience, clarity, discipline. These were the tools he forged in silence. The weak chase company because they fear what silence reveals. But the strong, like Marcus, run toward solitude because they know the truth. No enemy is more dangerous than the one within, and no ally is more powerful. When you master your own mind, the world bends differently. Challenges become games. Disrespect becomes irrelevant. Pain becomes data. Because you've trained in solitude, you've met yourself in the mirror and did not flinch. And that's what Marcus did, over and over again. In every line of Meditations you can feel it. A man sitting alone, writing to his soul. No audience, no filter, just brutal, raw self-inquiry. And yet, those words, written in silence, still speak louder than armies. They have echoed for 2,000 years, not because he had followers, but because he had integrity, because he spoke the language of the soul, a language you can only learn in solitude. And that's what most people miss. They think strength is loud, flashy, public, but Marcus knew strength is quiet, composed, inner. He ruled with wisdom because he sat with his own ignorance. He led millions because he had learned to lead himself. He didn't need attention because he had already gained alignment. That's what solitude gave him. And it can give it to you too. But it requires you to stop chasing noise, to step away from the need to always be seen, liked, heard, praised. It requires you to do something terrifying, to be alone with your own thoughts. And yet, that is where transformation begins. Being single is not a curse. It is a corridor, a sacred space where you build the foundation of who you are without interference. No compromises, no masks, just clarity. If Marcus could find this in the heart of Rome, you can find it in your own life. Solitude is not something to survive, it is something to seek. Because the moment you stop fearing it, you begin to understand it. And when you understand solitude, you are no longer afraid of yourself. You become your own source, your own fire, your own empire. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That wasn't just poetry, it was survival. It was his blueprint, his strategy, and it should be yours. The world will always be noisy. People will always try to pull you into their storms, but you must remember who you are in the silence. You must create that silence, because in that space, you will find what Marcus found, the truth. And the truth is this: being alone is not the absence of something, it is the presence of everything that matters. Section 2. The Modern Trap. Why the world fears being alone. There was a time when being alone meant being alive, when the hunter stepped away from the tribe, not out of shame or rejection, but for clarity, for edge, for survival. In the ancient world, solitude wasn't exile, it was evolution, but something changed. Fast forward to today, and you'll find a society more connected than ever, and more terrified of being alone than any generation before it. We've built a world designed to distract us from ourselves. Notifications, dopamine hits, validation loops, the endless scroll of artificial connection. We're surrounded by people and lonelier than ever. Why? Because modern culture doesn't just discourage solitude, it pathologizes it. We're taught that being single is a failure, that being alone is something to be fixed. We're told to chase the next relationship, the next night out, the next escape from our own silence. But Marcus Aurelius would have seen it clearly. This isn't progress. This is a trap. Dark psychology lies at the root of it. Corporations, industries, and algorithms have found a terrifying truth: that lonely people are easy to control, easy to sell to, easy to manipulate. A person who feels incomplete on their own is a person who will spend, scroll, swipe, and submit, desperate to feel whole. That's the trick. That's the trap. They don't want you to find strength in solitude, because once you do, you become untouchable. You no longer need what they're selling, and nothing is more dangerous to a system built on dependency than a person who's learned to stand alone. Think about the language. Single, loner, introvert. These words are loaded, not with truth, but with shame, as if solitude was some kind of deficiency. But Marcus would tell you otherwise. He'd remind you that being alone is the default state of every strong soul. He'd remind you that no empire is built in the crowd. It's built in the silence before the crowd even knows your name. The modern world thrives on distraction. They keep you busy, so you never ask dangerous questions. Questions like, who am I without the noise? Or what am I capable of if I stop seeking approval? Because once you ask those questions, the illusion breaks. You realize you don't need the relationship that drains you. You don't need the fake friends, the performative lifestyle, the endless consumption. You realize that everything you were seeking out there was something you had the potential to build in here, inside yourself. But there's a reason people avoid this truth. It's not easy. Solitude is honest, brutally honest. It doesn't flatter, it doesn't distract, it confronts, it holds up a mirror and asks you to see what you've been avoiding. Your patterns, your pain, your power. Most people can't handle that. So they chase noise, they chase people, they chase anything but themselves. And yet the truth remains, you cannot escape yourself. Not forever. The longer you run from solitude, the longer you delay your evolution. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth, and yet his most powerful moments weren't on the battlefield or in the Senate. They were in the quiet, in the stillness, alone with his thoughts, writing, reflecting, refining. That's where the emperor was forged. Not in front of others, but away from them. Today, that same opportunity exists for you, but you have to unplug from the trap. You have to see what the system doesn't want you to see. That solitude is your superpower. That being single is not a punishment, it's preparation. You're not waiting for someone to complete you. You're building someone so complete that they become the gravitational force. You become the one people orbit, not because you begged for their attention, but because you mastered your presence. This is the modern rebellion. Not loud, not angry, but still, unshakable, focused. A man or woman who learns to enjoy their own company becomes dangerous. Because once you can sit alone in silence and not feel anxious, you've passed a test that most of the world fails daily. You've taken back control from the algorithms, the expectations, the social narratives. You've remembered something primal, something ancient, something Marcus knew well, that solitude is where the strong are made. But the world won't hand that truth to you. You have to take it. You have to unlearn the lie that says your worth is defined by your relationship status, your social calendar, your follower count. Those things don't define you. They distract you. What defines you is what you do when no one is watching, what you build when no one claps, who you become when no one tells you who to be. The system wants you dependent, but solitude makes you sovereign. It makes you responsible. It makes you conscious. And most of all, it makes you free. That's why they fear it. That's why they sell you everything but yourself. Because once you discover who you are alone, no one can sell you a cheaper version. Once you love your own company, you stop tolerating anyone who depletes your peace. Once you taste the power of true solitude, you'll never settle for shallow company again. So ask yourself, have you chosen your life? Or have you inherited it from a culture designed to keep you distracted? Have you built your identity from solitude? Or have you borrowed it from the crowd? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary. Because until you break the illusion, you will live your entire life afraid of your own company, afraid of your own mind. And Marcus would have seen that as the greatest tragedy of all. He knew what we've forgotten, that the noise is the lie. And the silence, that's where the truth lives, the truth of who you are, the truth of what you're capable of, the truth of your purpose. But you'll never hear it if you're constantly surrounded by noise. That's the modern trap. Escape it, not tomorrow, not someday, now. While the world numbs itself in the crowd, you will rise in the silence. And in that silence, you will become what they fear the most, someone who no longer needs them. Section 3. The mind of a warrior. Solitude as a weapon, not a weakness. The battlefield is not just a place of swords and blood. It exists in the mind, in the boardroom, in relationships, in silence. And those who survive it, those who conquer it, do not win because they are loud or social or popular. They win because they are focused, disciplined, unshakable. Marcus Aurelius was not a philosopher who sat comfortably behind walls. He was a general, a warrior, a leader who lived through 15 years of war, who saw death and betrayal not from books, but from the front lines. And yet in every moment of crisis, he returned to the same weapon, solitude. He knew what most never learn, that the most dangerous mind is the one that has mastered being alone. You see, solitude is not some passive state. It's not about sitting in a cave and escaping the world. No, for a warrior, solitude is active. It is where strategy is born. It is where the ego dies and clarity rises. It is where emotions are tamed and decisions sharpen like steel. Every great military mind, from Marcus to Sun Tzu, understood this. The greatest strength does not come from rage or noise. It comes from stillness, controlled stillness. The kind of stillness that can choose whether or not to destroy you. The kind of stillness that sees 10 steps ahead while everyone else is reacting emotionally. That stillness is born in solitude. Most people today mistake noise for power. They think dominance is loud, that charisma is fast-talking, that strength is measured by how many people follow you. But look closer. Truly dangerous people, those who shape the world, rarely speak without purpose. They are not constantly surrounded. They are not obsessed with being seen. Why? Because they've learned the hard way that being alone is not weakness. It's a training ground. It's the arena where the real work gets done. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire constantly under threat. Internal revolts, external invasions, deadly plagues. And yet, his first priority wasn't always military. It was internal. It was mastering the mind. Why? Because no army can be led effectively by a man at war with himself. And you don't find inner peace in the crowd. You find it in solitude. His meditations were not just philosophical ramblings. They were battle plans for the mind, for the soul, for life itself. He wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just stoicism, that's warfare, inner warfare. And solitude is the battlefield where this war is fought. Most people try to skip it. They fill every moment of their day with noise, podcasts, messages, calls, endless small talk. They fear the silence because they fear what it might reveal, that they are undisciplined, unfocused, unprepared. But a true warrior walks willingly into that silence, because in that silence, they meet their real opponent, their own mind. It's in solitude that you notice the thoughts that dominate you, the fears that paralyze you, the desires that control you. And it's also in solitude that you learn to master them, to observe them without flinching, to challenge them without distraction. That's what Marcus did. Alone in his tent with armies pressing on every side, he didn't just strategize against the enemy, he strategized against his own weakness, his own anger, his own pride, because he knew that the empire could not be led by a man who had not conquered himself. That's why solitude is a weapon, because it gives you the time, the space, the silence to sharpen yourself, to rehearse not just success, but failure, and how you'll respond to it, to imagine not just victory but defeat, and how you'll recover from it. The man who spends time in solitude does not walk into battle unprepared. He has already faced the worst-case scenario. He has already died 1,000 mental deaths, and because of that, nothing surprises him. He is calm, unshaken, dangerous. You don't need to be in a war to use solitude like a warrior. The modern world is full of battles. Financial battles, emotional ones, psychological ones. Every time you face temptation, that's a battle. Every time you hold your tongue when anger flares, that's a battle. Every time you choose focus over comfort, that's a battle. And you do not win those battles by accident. You win them because you trained in silence, because you were alone with your demons long before they appeared in the real world. Marcus wasn't perfect. He doubted himself. He questioned his emotions. He faced grief and fatigue and loneliness, but he didn't run from them. He studied them. He dissected them. He turned solitude into a laboratory of resilience. That's what warriors do. They don't just fight, they train, they study, they prepare. And all of that happens when no one is watching. So understand this: every second you spend alone is either a weapon or a weakness. If you use solitude to escape responsibility, it will break you. But if you use solitude to build discipline, it will sharpen you. The difference is in how you approach it. Most people seek solitude only when they're in pain, but the warrior seeks it in peace, because he knows that's when the real work gets done. Not when you're desperate, but when you're clear-headed, focused, intentional. Solitude is where you test your principles, where you ask yourself, who am I when nothing is expected of me? The world gives us scripts, social roles, masks. But solitude strips that all away. And that stripping process is painful. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've been hiding. But that confrontation is the path to mastery. You can't fake it in solitude. You can't lie to yourself. And once you've faced your raw self in the silence, no one can use your flaws against you because you've already seen them, owned them, and begun to rise above them. Marcus understood this. That's why he could be surrounded by senators, generals, enemies, and still remain centered, because he had already faced the chaos in his own heart. He had already waged the inner war. That's why he could write calmly about death, betrayal, ambition, and injustice. He had processed them, not through distraction, but through deliberate solitude. So if you want to walk like a warrior in this world, stop fearing being alone. Start using it. Wake up earlier than everyone else and sit in the silence. Observe your thoughts before the world fills your head with noise. Plan your life before others try to script it for you. Practice detachment before life rips things from your hands. Build resilience before adversity arrives. This is how you use solitude as a weapon. In a world of constant distraction, the focused mind is a rarity. And in a world of artificial confidence, the truly grounded person is a threat. Be that threat. Be the one who has mastered being alone, not because you had no choice, but because you saw the value in it. Solitude is not exile. It is elevation. It is preparation. It is power. And those who understand this do not fear being single. They welcome it. They turn it into an edge. They turn it into armor. Because solitude, when wielded with discipline, makes you a warrior the world cannot break. Section 4. Emotional Mastery, the psychological edge of being. Single, there is a war most people never talk about. It doesn't make headlines, it doesn't leave visible scars, but it rages on, quietly in bedrooms, in offices, in the moments between texts that never get answered, in the anxiety that creeps in when you're alone at night. It is the war for emotional control, and most are losing it silently, not because they're weak, but because they never learned how to fight it. They were never taught what Marcus Aurelius understood over 2,000 years ago. That emotional mastery is not a luxury, it's survival. And solitude, being single, is not an obstacle to that mastery. It is the foundation. In a world built to exploit your emotions, the person who masters them becomes a different species. Think about what modern life demands of you. Be available, be responsive, be liked, be validated, be in a relationship or be questioned. Everywhere you turn, there are systems that profit from your emotional instability. The dating apps don't want you to find love, they want you to keep swiping. Social media doesn't care about your happiness, it cares about your attention. And even some relationships are built not on love, but on mutual addiction. Two people terrified of being alone, clinging to each other like drowning passengers on a sinking ship. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside." Events. Realize this and you will find strength. Those weren't poetic words for him. They were battle-tested wisdom. He lived surrounded by betrayal, by death, by false friends, and by pressure we can barely imagine. And yet, in the middle of it all, he cultivated a calm, focused, and emotionally disciplined mind. He didn't have the luxury of being emotionally reactive. As emperor, his emotions could not rule him because his decisions ruled an empire. Most people today are ruled by their emotions without even realizing it. They respond to messages immediately out of fear of being ignored. They agree to things they don't want to do because they're scared to disappoint. They lash out when rejected. They collapse when alone. And that's not a personal failure. It's a cultural epidemic. We've been conditioned to fear solitude, not because it's painful, but because it forces us to face our emotional dependency. That's the edge of being single, if you use it. Because when you're not constantly managing someone else's emotions or waiting for someone to validate yours, you finally have the space to observe, to notice your impulses, to investigate your reactions, to ask the hard questions. Why did that comment bother me so much? Why do I crave constant communication? Why do I feel empty when I'm not needed? Solitude exposes the wiring underneath, your emotional habits. And once exposed, you can begin to rewire it. You can train yourself to respond, not react, to observe, not absorb. You can practice detachment not in the cold, heartless sense, but in the powerful sense, the kind of detachment that allows you to feel deeply without being controlled by those feelings. Marcus did not numb himself. He grieved, he suffered. He felt the pain of loss, the bitterness of betrayal, but he didn't let those emotions consume his reason. He let them pass through him like storms. He anchored himself in something deeper, his principles, his values, his purpose. That's emotional mastery, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to carry it without being carried away by it. Being single gives you the perfect training ground for this. Because when you're alone, your emotional triggers rise to the surface. There's no partner to distract you, no one to blame, just you and the truth. That moment when you feel lonely on a Friday night and you sit with it instead of rushing into distraction, that's emotional training. That moment when you don't text your ex even though every part of your body wants to, that's emotional strength. That moment when you feel the ache of isolation and still choose to keep building your life, that's power. Most people confuse emotional comfort with emotional strength. They think being in a relationship means they're emotionally stable, but often they're just outsourcing their regulation. They rely on someone else to calm them down, to affirm them, to distract them from their inner chaos. That's not strength. That's dependency dressed in romance. The Stoics didn't chase comfort, they chased clarity. They knew that the emotions you don't face in solitude will destroy you in relationships. That the anger you don't master alone will turn into cruelty when provoked. That the insecurity you ignore will become jealousy. That the fear of abandonment will lead you to self-sabotage. And so they trained, not once, daily, relentlessly. Because emotional mastery isn't a one-time achievement, it's a lifetime discipline. Being single gives you the bandwidth to build that discipline. You're not distracted by someone else's emotional storms. You have the chance to build your internal weather system, to become your own source of calm, to study your past, your wounds, your patterns, and to rewrite the story. This doesn't mean you never enter a relationship again. It means that when you do, you walk in as a master, not a slave. As someone who can love deeply, but isn't destroyed. If love fades, as someone who can hold space for another without losing themselves in the process. Marcus Aurelius knew the stakes. He didn't have time for emotional chaos, and neither do you. Not if you want to lead, not if you want to build, not if you want to walk the path of the few. The world is full of people reacting, panicking, breaking down. Be the exception. Be the one who trains when no one is watching, who resists when no one would blame you for giving in, who chooses self-control not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. There is no shortcut to emotional mastery. No app, no coach, no course will do it for you. It happens in the moments when you're alone, when you're triggered, and you breathe through it, when you want to scream and instead you reflect, when you want to run and instead you sit. It's forged in the crucible of solitude, and that is why being single is not a waiting room for real life. It is real life. It is the gym where your emotional muscles are built. It is the classroom where wisdom is earned. It is the dojo where your spirit learns to fight without violence, to lead without arrogance, to love without fear. So next time you feel the ache of being alone, remember, This is not a weakness to escape. This is a season to master. Every hour you spend facing yourself is 1 hour closer to the man or woman who cannot be broken, not by rejection, not by loss, not by failure, because they have mastered the most unpredictable force in the universe, their own emotions. That is the Stoic edge. That is the warrior's path. That is your advantage. Section 5. Love, lust, and the illusion of completion. There is a lie we've all been fed since childhood, a sweet, seductive, destructive lie that somewhere out there is someone who will complete you. Your other half, your soulmate, the missing piece. It sounds romantic, doesn't it? But it's not wisdom, it's fantasy, it's mythology built to make you weak. Because when you believe you are incomplete without someone else, you hand over your power before the relationship even begins. Marcus Aurelius would have shattered this illusion without hesitation. Because he understood the truth, you were never broken. And you don't need to be completed. You need to be revealed, you need to be strengthened, you need to become whole on your own. The Stoics didn't reject love. They embraced it, but not as dependency, not as identity. They viewed love as a shared virtue, not a rescue mission. Marcus himself was married to Faustina for many years, but never once did he write that she completed him. Never once did he suggest his worth came from her affection. His strength was internal, self-made, because he knew that the love of another cannot substitute for the lack of love within yourself. Today, the world weaponizes romance. Watch any movie, listen to any song, scroll through any platform. They all whisper the same message. You're not enough without someone. That you're only truly happy, truly successful, truly human when you're in love. But that's not love. That's addiction, that's fantasy, and the cost is your soul. What happens when you believe someone else is your source of happiness? You tolerate things you shouldn't. You bend yourself to fit their expectations. You give up your mission to protect their comfort. And worst of all, you stop growing. Because if they complete you, then the work is done, right? No, the work is never done. Not if you're walking the Stoic path. Not if you're aiming for greatness. Love is not the end. It is a chapter, a reflection of the strength you've already built. Lust, on the other hand, is a different beast. It disguises itself as passion, but underneath it's often fear. Fear of being alone, fear of not being wanted, fear of not being enough. And so people chase bodies, not souls. They chase distraction, not depth. They confuse validation for connection. Marcus Aurelius warned against this, not with judgment, but with clarity. He reminded himself in Meditations that physical pleasures are fleeting and that desire unchecked becomes slavery. Ask yourself, how many of your decisions have been driven by lust, by the need to be seen, touched, held, needed? And how many of those decisions led you away from your purpose? The Stoics knew that every desire has a cost. Not all costs are financial. Some cost you your focus. Some cost you your discipline. Some cost you years. Lust is expensive, especially when it comes disguised as love. And yet, we crave it. Why? Because the illusion of completion is easier than the truth of growth. It's easier to believe someone will save you than to become your own savior. It's easier to lose yourself in someone else's life than to build your own. But Marcus didn't take the easy road. He sat with discomfort. He wrote through pain. He faced the void, not with a partner's hand in his, but with his own mind, his own reason, his own courage. There is nothing wrong with love, but love is only beautiful when it is chosen, not needed, when it is born from abundance, not desperation. The love that Marcus would have respected is not the love that completes you. It is the love that challenges you, that sharpens you, that respects your solitude because it comes from someone who has mastered their own. And that's the secret. When you stop searching for someone to complete you, you become someone worth finding. Not because you need anyone, but because you don't. You radiate presence, confidence, power, and ironically, that's when real love finds you, if it does at all. Because now it's not about filling a void, it's about sharing a flame. Being single is not a pause button, it's not a waiting room for romance. It's not a transitional phase, it's a state of power. A sacred time to meet yourself, understand yourself, and love yourself in ways no one else ever could. You learn to sleep alone without feeling lonely. You learn to walk into rooms without needing to be seen. You learn to feel desire without letting it rule you. That's not weakness, that's dominance, that's emotional sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius lived among the elite. He saw marriages built on politics, lust, and appearances. But he wasn't fooled. He knew that most relationships are contracts of mutual insecurity, and he refused to live that way. He held himself to a higher standard, and so should you. The next time you feel that ache, that hunger for someone to complete you, pause. Don't run from it. Don't numb it. Study it, interrogate it, ask, what part of me feels incomplete? What wound am I trying to fill? Because the truth is, no lover can heal the parts of you that you refuse to face. No kiss can cover the pain you've buried. No partner can fix what only solitude can reveal. And once you face that truth, something incredible happens. You stop chasing. You start building. You stop performing. You start becoming. You stop settling. You start rising. And in that process, you become a different kind of person. Not perfect, but grounded, awake, dangerous, in the best possible way. Because now, no one owns your peace. No one has the power to destroy you with silence or rejection or absence. You've already been alone, and you made it through, stronger, wiser, sharper. This is the illusion the world feeds you, that you need someone else to be whole. And it's a lie. The Stoics knew it. Marcus Aurelius lived it. And now, it's your turn to break free from it, because when you realize that no one is coming to save you, not a lover, not a friend, not a fantasy, that's when you become powerful beyond measure. Not cold, not numb, but full, self-contained, capable of giving love freely because you no longer give it to escape yourself. You are not a half waiting for another half. You are a whole, becoming more whole every day you walk this path. And when love finally enters your life again, if it ever does, it won't complete you. It will simply witness you. Section 6. The solitary path to greatness. Greatness is not a group project. It's not built in circles of comfort or in rooms full of applause. It's forged in silence, in the hours when no one is watching, in the early mornings when the world still sleeps, in the late nights when you're exhausted, doubting, uncertain, but still pushing forward. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. That's why his meditations, his most impactful work, weren't letters to his subjects or speeches to his army. They were letters to himself, reflections scribbled in solitude. Because he knew what modern society keeps forgetting: if you want to rise above the ordinary, you have to walk a path that most will never dare to take, the solitary path. You can't build an empire while trying to fit in. You can't master your mind while constantly seeking validation. You can't become powerful while being dependent on someone else for your identity. The road to greatness is narrow, not because others aren't capable, but because they're not willing. They're not willing to endure the silence, the boredom, the self-doubt, the grind. Most people would rather be distracted than disciplined. They'd rather be liked than respected. They'd rather feel good now than become great later. That's why they never make it. But Marcus wasn't most people. He didn't complain about his isolation. He didn't chase fame or flattery. He ruled the most powerful empire on earth while constantly reminding himself that none of it mattered if he hadn't first ruled himself. "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be," he wrote. "Be one." That is the call. To action, not to theorize, not to wait, but to become. And becoming requires solitude, because it is only in solitude that you find the clarity to know what you're becoming. Look at the life of anyone who's done something extraordinary. Inventors, philosophers, generals, poets, revolutionaries, they all have one thing in common: a time alone. Time to think, time to suffer, time to build. Nikola Tesla would spend days in complete isolation just visualizing his inventions. Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated samurai, lived much of his life alone, writing his philosophy of combat and life. Even artists like Beethoven and Van Gogh created their masterpieces in states of profound solitude. Greatness demands separation, not forever, but long enough for transformation. That's why being single is not a weakness. It's a phase of power, a chapter where you stop investing energy into others and pour it all into yourself, your vision, your craft, your discipline. This is not about avoiding people. It's about refining yourself so that when you do re-enter the world, you do so as a force, not a follower. But solitude is uncomfortable. It reveals your excuses. It puts a mirror in front of your laziness. It doesn't allow you to lie to yourself. And that's exactly why it works. Because while others are chasing comfort, you are embracing growth. While others are numbing themselves with attention, you are sharpening yourself with intention. Marcus didn't have social media. He didn't have a therapist. He didn't have an audience. He had his journal, his thoughts, his principles, and his will, and that was enough to shape one of the most balanced, powerful, and principled lives in history. He didn't just rule an empire, he ruled himself. That's the essence of greatness, dominion over the self. And here's the truth that no one wants to admit. Most relationships, most social obligations, most daily conversations are nothing more than distractions from your real work. Not all of them, but enough. And if you're honest, you'll see it, you'll feel it. You'll realize how much time you've wasted explaining yourself to people who don't understand your vision. How much energy you've spent trying to please those who would never walk a mile in your shoes. How many hours you've lost talking instead of doing. Solitude exposes all of that. And if you let it, it will refine you into something rare. Someone who doesn't just talk about discipline but lives it. Someone who doesn't need the spotlight to validate their grind. Someone who doesn't crave approval because they've already approved of themselves. This is what makes the solitary path powerful. Not because it's lonely, but because it's clarifying. It reveals your real priorities. It shows you who you are without the influence of others. And in that clarity, you begin to build with precision. You stop copying, you start creating. You stop consuming, you start producing. You stop waiting, you start moving. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than his ambitions." But how can you know your ambitions if your mind is always full of other people's noise? Solitude clears the channel. It gives you space to listen to your deepest calling, not the calling of your ego, not the calling of your culture, but the quiet, unshakable voice that tells you what you were born to do. And when you finally hear that voice, your life changes. You stop wasting time, you stop compromising, you stop playing small, because now you know. You know who you are, what you're building, and why it matters. And once you know that, no one can distract you again. So, if you're single right now, if you're walking alone, don't rush to escape it. Lean into it, use it, turn your solitude into strategy. Build the habits, the skills, the body, the business, the mind that your future self will thank you for. The world will tempt you to rejoin the noise, to settle, to conform. But you're not here to be average. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be great, and greatness begins in solitude. Section 7. The death of distraction. Reclaiming focus and flow through solitude. Distraction is the silent killer of dreams. It doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself. It seduces. It whispers. It wraps itself in comfort and convenience, and before you know it, you've lost weeks, months, even years, chasing things that don't matter, responding to every ping, scrolling for hours, saying yes to the wrong invitations, answering questions no one is asking, and worst of all, neglecting your mission, your gift, your genius. Marcus Aurelius would have called it what it is, a betrayal of your purpose. You were not born to consume endlessly. You were not created to live on autopilot, bouncing from one shallow stimulus to the next. You were born to think, to create, to build, to focus. And the only place where that level of focus can be forged, the only place where your mind becomes a weapon, is solitude. Look around you. The modern world is engineered for distraction. Every platform, every feed, every piece of content is designed to hijack your attention. Your brain isn't broken, it's being attacked. And unless you reclaim control, unless you retreat into intentional solitude, you will lose your life to noise. Marcus Aurelius lived in a world of power, wealth, and responsibility. And yet, even in the chaos of ruling an empire, he carved out time to write, to reflect, to think deeply. He understood that external power meant nothing without internal clarity. He didn't just fight for Rome, he fought for his mind. And today, that same war rages on, not with swords and shields, but with screens and distractions. The cost of distraction is invisible. That's what makes it so dangerous. You don't feel it immediately. There's no physical wound. But slowly, silently, it erodes your greatness. It fragments your focus. It scatters your energy. And it turns your potential into regret. Not because you weren't talented, but because you were too distracted to finish what you started. Solitude is the antidote. Not passive solitude, where you simply sit and do nothing. No. This is active solitude, strategic solitude. You unplug from the world so you can plug into your mission. You turn off the noise so you can hear your own voice. You remove the clutter so you can execute with precision. That's how you kill distraction, by starving it of your attention. Focus is not a switch you flip. It's a skill you cultivate. And like any skill, it requires training. Every time you choose deep work over instant gratification, you train your mind. Every time you turn off your phone and dive into your craft, you train your attention. Every time you say no to a low-value invitation, you sharpen your boundaries. Over time, that training compounds. It becomes momentum, and momentum becomes mastery. People think focus is about willpower. It's not. It's about design. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And the most powerful system you can build is solitude. A place, a time, a rhythm where you disconnect from the world and reconnect with yourself. Where you go to think, to plan, to build, to become. That's not selfish, that's sacred. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That wasn't poetry. That was survival. That was how he stayed sane amidst war, betrayal, and chaos. He built an internal fortress, and you must do the same, because the world isn't going to get quieter. The distractions aren't going away. If anything, they're multiplying, becoming more subtle, more addictive, and the only way to win is to opt out, to choose solitude as your sanctuary. In solitude, you enter flow, real flow, not the fake productivity that comes from multitasking or checking boxes. No, this is deep, immersive, all-consuming focus, the kind of focus that leads to breakthroughs, to art, to results that shift the direction of your life. And you can't access that state when you're being pulled in 10 different directions. You need time, space, silence, and you need to protect those things with the same intensity you'd protect your physical health or your finances. Most people today don't guard their focus. They give it away freely, to algorithms, to gossip, to meaningless conversations. And then they wonder why they feel empty, why their goals never materialize, why they're always behind. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they're distracted, constantly, relentlessly, and the only solution is a radical commitment to solitude. If you want to build something that lasts, if you want to write, invent, train, grow, lead, you need time away from the crowd, time to dive deep, to make mistakes in private, to refine your vision without interference. That's not isolation, that's incubation. That's where legends are born. Solitude doesn't mean you abandon the world. It means you stop letting it control you. It means you choose what gets your attention, your energy, your time. It means you stop reacting and start creating. And that one shift from consumer to creator is what separates the mediocre from the great. So here's the challenge. Audit your attention. Where does it go? Who controls it? What steals it? And most importantly, what would happen if you took it back? What would you build? Who would you become? What kind of impact could you make if your mind was sharp, undistracted, fully engaged? You already know the answer. But knowing isn't enough. You have to act. You have to unplug. You have to say no. You have to endure the discomfort of silence, of boredom, of being out of the loop, because that discomfort is temporary, but the rewards of focus are eternal. In the end, you have a choice. Be entertained by distraction or empowered by discipline. Be consumed by the crowd or refined in solitude. Be average or be great. And if you choose solitude, if you kill distraction and reclaim your focus, then the world will no longer shape you. You will shape it. Section 8. Building the inner citadel. Becoming untouchable in mind and spirit. What does it mean to be untouchable? Not in the sense of being above others, isolated in arrogance or coldness, but untouchable in your core, unshakable in the storms of life. This is the essence of the Stoic ideal, the inner citadel. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about this fortress within, a place where no external force could invade unless you allowed it. A sanctuary of reason, strength, and serenity that cannot be breached by the chaos of the world or the turmoil of others. In a world that constantly seeks to destabilize you, to pull you off balance, to trigger your emotions, the inner citadel is your most powerful weapon. It's the psychological and spiritual armor that protects your peace and your purpose. It's what allows you to stand firm when everything around you is crumbling. And it begins in solitude. The world will try to invade your mind at every turn. Social media comments, toxic relationships, professional setbacks, global crises. These things are designed to break you down, to keep you reactive and distracted. But if you've built your inner citadel, these external pressures bounce off. Like arrows against stone. You don't ignore reality. You face it, yes, but you don't let it control your emotional landscape. That is power. Marcus Aurelius didn't have the luxury of modern self-help or therapy. His inner citadel was forged in the heat of battle, both literal and metaphorical. As emperor, he faced wars, betrayals, political intrigue, and personal loss. Yet in the midst of it all, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is the mindset of the inner citadel. Obstacles are not barriers, but opportunities to fortify yourself, to turn adversity into strength. But building this fortress is not easy. It requires relentless self-awareness and discipline. You must first recognize what threatens your peace: toxic people, negative thoughts, destructive habits. Then, you must take decisive action to remove or neutralize those threats. This is where solitude becomes essential. Alone, you gain the clarity to see what is poison and what is nourishment for your mind. You learn to say no without guilt. You learn to protect your boundaries with fierce loyalty to yourself. The inner citadel is also about mastery over your emotions. The Stoics were not advocates of suppressing feelings, but of understanding and directing them wisely. Marcus Aurelius reminds us to treat every emotion like a messenger, not a master. Anger, fear, envy, they all arrive with messages about your values and boundaries. But how you respond is what defines you. Do you let anger consume you, or do you let it teach you where you need to be stronger? Do you let fear freeze you, or do you let it prepare you for action? This mastery requires solitude because it demands honest conversations with yourself. In solitude, you face your true emotional state without distractions or excuses. You sit with discomfort until it loses its power. You practice resilience not through avoidance, but through direct engagement with your inner world. Another cornerstone of the inner citadel is the cultivation of virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Marcus Aurelius believed that true strength comes from embodying these virtues consistently, regardless of external circumstances. In solitude, away from the pressure to conform or perform, you can cultivate these virtues authentically. You can practice integrity in your thoughts and actions because there is no one watching except yourself. This leads to the highest form of freedom, freedom from the approval of others. When your inner citadel is strong, the opinions, judgments, and criticisms of others lose their grip on you. You become untouchable not because you're detached from humanity, but because your sense of self-worth is rooted in your own character, not in external validation. This is a radical power in a world obsessed with likes, followers, and social acceptance. Solitude also allows you to develop humility, the recognition that you are a small part of a much larger cosmos. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, yet he never lost sight of his mortality and the transient nature of life. This perspective anchors the inner citadel. It prevents arrogance and cultivates patience and compassion, even towards those who try to break you. When you build your inner citadel, you become a lighthouse in the storm. Others may falter, crumble, or lose themselves in chaos, but you remain steady. Your mind is clear, your spirit is calm, your purpose is unshaken. This is not an escape from reality, but a mastery of it. And here's the paradox. The more you retreat into solitude to build your inner citadel, the more connected you become, not just to yourself, but to the world around you. Because you act, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, not out of need, but out of strength, not out of reaction, but out of intention. You become someone who inspires others, not by chasing attention, but by embodying it. Someone who leads not by command, but by example. Someone who loves, not by dependence, but by freedom. That is the true power of solitude. It doesn't make you lonely. It makes you untouchable. It doesn't isolate you. It connects you to your highest self. And in the end, the inner citadel is not just a metaphor, it's a way of life, a choice you make every day to protect your peace, to sharpen your mind, and to rise above the chaos. Because when your mind is a fortress, no external storm can breach it. You are untouchable, you are sovereign, you are free. Section 9. From solitude to influence. How being alone amplifies your impact. Solitude is often misunderstood as isolation, a withdrawal from the world, a retreat into loneliness. But the truth is far more profound. Solitude is not about disconnecting. It's about reconnecting deeply with your inner purpose, your clarity, and your power. And from this foundation of solitude, true influence is born. Marcus Aurelius, the ultimate solitary ruler, demonstrated this truth, that the strength gained in solitude does not lead to insignificance or silence, but to a louder, more meaningful impact on the world. When you think of influence, what comes to mind? For many, it's a loud voice in a crowded room. It's followers, fans, likes, and applause. It's being everywhere, visible, seen. But Marcus teaches us a different kind of influence, the influence that grows quietly, from within. The influence that doesn't depend on external validation or constant interaction, but comes from depth, authenticity, and unwavering conviction. This influence, rooted in solitude, is not fleeting, it is enduring. Why is this the case? Because when you cultivate your inner world in solitude, you are no longer shaped by the opinions of others. You are no longer a reaction to the noise. Instead, you become a source of clarity, wisdom, and strength. And people are naturally drawn to that kind of energy, an energy that doesn't demand attention, but commands respect. This is the power of influence grounded in solitude. History's greatest leaders, thinkers, and creators were not always the most socially connected or the most talkative. They were often those who took the time to step back, reflect, and build. Their vision alone. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote his meditations in private, never intending them for public consumption. Yet those private reflections have influenced millions centuries later. His solitude became the source of his lasting legacy. In today's noisy world, the temptation is to broadcast every thought, to chase followers, to flood the internet with constant updates. But this often leads to dilution, not amplification of your true voice. True influence requires substance, and substance requires space. Space to think deeply, to refine your ideas, to understand what you stand for. This space is created through solitude. Solitude also sharpens your discernment, your ability to separate the essential from the trivial. When you're always connected, your attention splinters, your message becomes muddled. But when you retreat into solitude, you can focus on what truly matters, on the impact you want to leave. This clarity is magnetic. It attracts the right people, opportunities, and momentum. Influence isn't about quantity, it's about quality, and solitude is the catalyst for that quality. Another vital aspect of influence born from solitude is resilience. When your sense of self and your mission are forged in solitude, you develop a thick skin against criticism, envy, and opposition. The world will always push back against those who stand apart, who refuse to conform. But if your power comes from within, you remain unshaken. You don't need every voice to agree with you. You only need your own conviction. This resilience allows you to lead authentically, not as a chameleon adapting to the crowd, but as a lighthouse guiding others through the storm. You become a beacon of calm, strength, and integrity. And this kind of leadership inspires loyalty, not just from others, but from your own soul, because you lead yourself first. Moreover, solitude empowers creativity, the fuel of influence. In silence and isolation, ideas have room to grow, connect, and evolve. Without the noise of the world, your mind can wander into uncharted territories, challenge assumptions, and innovate. The creative breakthroughs that shift industries, change paradigms, and inspire movements often come from moments of deep solitude. So, solitude isn't the opposite of influence. It's the prerequisite. It's the foundation on which authentic, lasting impact is built. When you embrace solitude, you stop chasing superficial recognition and start building something real, something that lasts beyond trends, beyond social validation. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." Your influence isn't a reaction to others. It's a proactive creation of your highest self. It's living by example, rooted in virtue and strength developed in solitude. If you want to amplify your impact, start by embracing your alone time. Stop fearing solitude. Stop filling every moment with noise. Instead, use it as a laboratory for growth. Use it as a sanctuary for your vision. Use it as a forge for your character. From solitude comes clarity. From clarity comes conviction. From conviction comes influence. And from influence comes the power to change not just your life, but the lives of those around you. This is the real superpower of being single, of choosing solitude, not as a fallback, but as a strategy. It's the path to becoming the person who doesn't just exist in the world, but moves it. Section 10. The Solitude Blueprint. Daily Practices to Harness. Your superpower, solitude, is a superpower, but like any power, it must be cultivated, trained, and protected. It doesn't come naturally in a world designed to steal your attention and scatter your focus. You have to build it deliberately, every day. Marcus Aurelius wasn't born with his tranquility or his strength. He developed it through disciplined practice, daily rituals, and unwavering commitment to self-mastery. And you can do the same. The first step in harnessing the power of solitude is creating sacred time for yourself. This isn't about waiting for the perfect moment or the right circumstances. It's about claiming space in your day, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour, to be alone with your thoughts. No phone, no distractions, just you and your mind. Use this time to reflect, plan, or simply observe your thoughts without judgment. Over time, this daily ritual trains your mind to find calm amidst chaos. Next, cultivate the habit of journaling. Marcus Aurelius's meditations were essentially a journal, private notes to himself, guiding his mind toward wisdom and resilience. Journaling helps you clarify your values, confront your fears, and track your progress. Write honestly and without censorship. Let your journal become the laboratory where you experiment with your thoughts and challenge your limiting beliefs. Meditation is another vital tool. While not a practice from ancient Stoicism, meditation aligns perfectly with its principles. It teaches you to observe your mind, detach from destructive emotions, and return to reason. Even a few minutes daily can build mental clarity and emotional stability, the cornerstone of your inner citadel. Boundaries are essential. Solitude requires protection from the demands of others that drain your energy. Learn to say no to commitments that don't serve your growth. Be unapologetic about your need for alone time. This isn't selfishness, it's self-respect. When you guard your time fiercely, you're not just preserving solitude, you're sending a message to yourself and the world about what matters. Most create rituals around solitude. This might mean a morning routine that centers you before the world wakes, an evening walk to process the day, or scheduled digital detoxes. Rituals anchor your solitude in the rhythm of life, making it sustainable and sacred rather than an afterthought. Engage with your environment intentionally. Choose physical spaces that support solitude. Quiet corners, nature, minimalist rooms. Your environment shapes your mind. Declutter your space as you declutter your thoughts. Surround yourself with what fuels your focus, not what fragments it. Embrace discomfort. Solitude is not always comfortable. It reveals loneliness, fear, and the ego's craving for approval. But this discomfort is the gateway to growth. Sit with it, learn from it, transform it into strength. Marcus Aurelius faced battles, plague, and betrayal, all harsh realities no one escapes. Yet he thrived because he embraced the hard truths solitude revealed. Balance solitude with connection. Being alone doesn't mean being isolated from humanity. Choose your relationships wisely. Seek out those who support your growth and respect your need for space. Quality over quantity, authenticity over superficiality. When you cultivate solitude and surround yourself with the right people, you build a support system that uplifts rather than drains. Finally, remember why you seek solitude. It's not just to escape the world, but to return to it stronger, clearer, and more purposeful. Solitude is preparation for impact. It's the sharpening of the sword before battle. It's the silence before the roar. Marcus Aurelius concluded, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." Your solitude is that digging. Your daily practices are the tools. And the treasure you uncover is your true self, strong, free, and unstoppable. So commit today, claim your solitude, build your inner citadel, reclaim your focus, and watch as your life transforms from scattered noise into a symphony of purpose and power. Your superpower is waiting. The question is, will you step into it? If you found this journey through Marcus Aurelius' wisdom on solitude powerful, be sure to like this video, comment with your own original motivational quote, and turn on notifications so you never miss a future video from Stoic Life.